Welcome to Talent Blazers. My next guest has 10 years experience working as an employer brand and recruitment marketing expert, mostly at Rio Tinto. She has deep dived in delivering a multitude of candidate attraction and experience strategies across various work, which include EVP design and implementation, recruitment branding, journey mapping, and many other valuable initiatives to move the needle to improve the employer brand. Currently an employee brand consultant at TQ Solution, Rudys, welcome to Talent Blazers.
Thank you very much for having me.
Well, I'm really looking forward to jumping into the episode. Obviously, we're going to hone in on EVP mostly. For those who don't know much about TQ Solutions, can you share who TQ Solutions are?
Absolutely. So more broadly, TQ Solutions is a kind of talent workforce consulting business. But from that, we also have an arm that deals more specifically with kind of employer brand and experience. So we have a separate practice where we do a lot of kind of advisory and consulting work around EVP strategy and development.
And that really is your sweet spot, isn't it? Drawing on your experience.
Absolutely. I think our sweet spot is definitely EVP strategy. We love helping organizations really kind of understand, validate, and also refresh their EVPs. And we kind of help a lot of organizations around how they can help bring that to life and create a really great employee experience. We're not a full service agency. We kind of focus more on that strategy piece. So we don't delve too much into creative design or media buying. We kind of, again, specialize more on delivering a program of work to help organizations actually look at what their EVP is. And again, a lot of the strategy that sits behind that. But more importantly, we're just seeing a lot of organizations now wanting to talk about how they actually evolve that further into actually, bringing it to life. So what are the stories and then the magical content that sit behind an EVP strategy, and how do they now kind of refresh this and bring this to life so that they're talking to the right candidates and the right talent market?
Yeah, it sounds wonderful. Sounds like you're having a lot of fun with the breadth of projects that you're working on. Who are some of the customers? What's the range of employee sizes that you're typically working with in some of the sectors, just to put a little bit more context with who TQ Solutions work with?
I think probably one of the kind of great things about TQ Solutions is the varying different levels and kind of industries that we're approached by. And I've had the opportunity to work across some amazing sectors since being here. And we help organizations that are anywhere from the kind of, much smaller, kind of 300 plus people, all the way through to some very global large financial institutions that we're working with at the moment. So I think we've definitely got a lot of variety in the clients and the organizations that we're working with at the moment or have delivered work with over the last few months. And I think probably the more kind of exciting part of it is just the varying sectors and industries. And we're talking anything from, retail all the way through to the funeral industry and the funeral sector, which has definitely been a huge eye-opener, all the way through to, like I said, large global financial institutions. So it's great to see where everyone sits currently in their kind of EVP journey. So we've got clients who are anywhere from establishing an EVP all the way through to a lot of conversation that's happening around refreshing and validating. And we know that, things have changed significantly over the last couple of years. And it's great to see organizations that are now coming on board and actually realizing the importance of having a really good EVP, but also how it can have a great impact in the current war for talent that we're seeing at the moment in the external market. Yeah. So it's definitely, it's not kind of segmented to a particular industry or organizational size.
Yeah, got it. And how have you seen over the years being leading employer brand? How have you seen it change? What are some of the trends that you've and the evolution, say in the last 3 or 4 years, that employer brand has been on?
It's been very significant. I think everyone can feel it and everyone can see it in the market at the moment. It's fierce. It's really competitive at the moment, and there's so many external factors that we can see are contributing to the war for talent. There's just not enough people to fill jobs at the moment, and that's, again, impacting so many industries and sectors at the moment. And we've seen a significant shift in what the career drivers are now. What are those kind of employer factors that matter to people now, versus a few years ago? If I think about, the things that really mattered to people, where there was a much more of a focus on, brands and reputation and company sizes and office locations and, what are those kind of additional little benefits that people get around, free fruit baskets and breakfast every morning. And we've seen this huge significant shift to now it being a lot more human centric. It's a lot more personal for people now. We're seeing that talent at the moment, are very much focused on what's the impact that I can have, in my work? What are those meaningful career experiences that I can actually have at an organization? How does an organization contribute to my health and well-being? And we're hearing a lot more of those conversations now that are taking place in the market at the moment. And, again, having a really good, attractive EVP can make all the difference in whether potential employees are choosing your organization over competitors, if you're talking about the right things and that you're actually targeting the right talent market with the right, the right content.
So clearly the market's changed. Clearly there's been a real shift to focusing on the candidate and improving the experience to be a detractor, as well as an organization, an EVP's enabling people to apply for their positions as well. But what are the actual trends that you've seen in the evolution of building out an EVP? How has the influences of the current climate changed things relating to building out a new EVP or refreshing a new EVP? Are there new tactics that have been introduced?
So I think, a lot of organizations have realized that there has been a significant shift. And I think, when we're looking at EVPs, there's a lot, to build a very good EVP. I think you kind of need that level of authenticity, genuine conversation that actually resonates with your potential workforce and who you're trying to target. When we think of EVP, what is it? Probably start with, what is it not? It's not a magic wand. It's not going to overnight fix all of your talent challenges that you're currently facing in the market. And it's not going to, cause an influx of applications overnight. And neither is it a kind of, a one-sided conversation anymore. I remember back in the days, EVP was very much about us as an organization. This is what we do, and this is what we can, what we deliver, and here's what we're looking for, and here's what we want. Always been very one-sided. And I think, again, that natural evolution around the shifts and changes in the market at the moment and what people actually genuinely want in their careers, it's kind of moving more towards a two-way conversation. It's more now about, what can I experience? What's it like? Candidates are looking for a lot more of that kind of level of content and detail. And it's also not something that you kind of set and forget. I think a good EVP is something that you nurture, you adapt, and it has to have that agility and flexibility for you to be able to talk to the right, talent segment. So not every talent segment is looking for the same thing. And I think you've got to have a very agile approach to your EVP, and you've got to be able to, change and dial up and dial down the various, kind of things that you're talking to about when you're talking to various talent segments, because what matters to them may not matter to other cohort. And, what are some of those, again, shifts in what people are actually looking for, and what have we seen? We're very lucky. We get to see a lot of research, and we do a lot of research, whether it's, for organizations themselves or whether it's just industry wide. And, I love the fact that, we're now having conversations around, I want to know, what's my development, what's my impact, what's my well-being, support, and things that extend extend far beyond your traditional kind of EAP services. People want a lot more support now. What's flexibility? I remember back in the days, flexibility was like this big kind of like, this is what makes us different, and here's our point of differentiation. Whereas now flexibility is kind of seen as it's table stakes. People are expecting and demanding organizations to be a lot more flexible around, how they work and where they work. And that's, really coming up top. And again, we can say thank you to COVID for a lot of that. People have realized that, well-being and flexibility, support, all of these things matter a lot more than, traditional factors such as, just remuneration and benefits. We are seeing a lot more people following non-traditional career paths. People are looking, around autonomy and development and what's my career paths and what's available to me. So we're seeing a huge significant shift, I think, at the moment in what talent wants.
So regarding an EVP and taking a company through the process of either starting a new EVP or refreshing their old one, has something new been introduced, a point of difference, when it's something that you would really recommend to do because it is cutting edge? It's a new type of process for them to unearth the new EVP. What are you seeing?
So I think, again, we are seeing a lot of organizations now wanting to kind of, refresh their EVPs. Again, something maybe, that might have been developed kind of 2-3 years ago. We are now having these conversations with a lot of clients around, is it still valid? And does it still resonate with my, even your current workforce? Because again, we've got to look at EVP from a lens of, it's not just about talent attraction, it's also about retention as well. So, you want that, you want the messaging to be able to still resonate with people. And, there's a lot more, like I said, different factors on the table now where, people are looking for things like diversity, inclusion, and, corporate social responsibility and, climate change and all of these things. And I think organizations have got a very hard kind of task ahead of them in the sense that they actually have to now factor in a lot more things when they're talking to candidates and talking about a lot more different things that sit outside of your traditional buckets of what an EVP once kind of stood for. At TQ, we have a model that we work to. So it's a 5 dimensions model. And I think, organizations who are currently having a discussion or think about, what's their EVP at the moment, we are kind of talking to them around designing things that are a lot more human-centric. I think it's really important that you delve a lot deeper into the human nature of an organization and unpack factors around impacts in roles. How are people going to be respected? How are they going to be supported with well-being? How do they maintain their sense of identity? And how do we help them bring this to life? And I think, the kind of human deal has become a more important deal. Where once upon a time it was very much of a transactional relationship. That was the EVP. Here's what we give you and here's what you give us back. There's been that kind of shift in the way that people are thinking now where it's a lot more inspired by, again, a human-led type of relationship. So we have got a framework that we work to, which is, like I mentioned, a kind of 5 dimensions model. And that really helps us look at the way an organization is currently breaking down their EVP and then helping them bring it more to life, considering current factors. So how do talent think? How do they feel? What do they want to do? So it's becoming a lot more personal. And that's probably one of the biggest shifts I think I've seen in the last couple of years.
So the 5D model, it sounds really interesting. Without giving away any secret sauce, what are the 5 attributes of the model?
So the kind of what we've looked at, and again, through all of our kind of research, our experience collectively in the employer brand and experience team that we've got, we have kind of basically looked at, we get a lot of research. So we look at an organization. So what do they currently have at the moment? So let's take, for example, a company is looking at refreshing an EVP and their strategy at the moment. So we would look at all of the research touch points and data touch points that they've got available to them. So it could be anything from existing data, such as your global employee engagement surveys, or regular surveys that organizations conduct, all the way through to what are they missing. So do we need to add to this further by conducting focus groups, additional surveys to really bring to life what matters to people. And one of the biggest challenges is when you've got this kind of huge plethora of data and research, what do you do with it, and how do you help break it down so organizations can actually see where it makes the most impact? So the 5D model helps us decipher that. It helps us decipher research. It helps us decipher where to populate certain content and employer factors that actually matter to people. And it's not all aspirational. It's got to be authentic and genuine. And this is what your current employees are experiencing at the moment. So we've got 5 pillars, and they comprise of career, well-being, culture, organization, and work. And we've got various factors that then sit under each of these pillars, and there's a whole host of kind of attributes that we look at. So without giving away too much, I can kind of touch on what are those things that we're looking for under, let's say, work. So back in the days, work was just work. Here's the job description, here's the role, here's what you're going to be doing, here's our expectations of you as an employee. Whereas at the moment now, what we're looking more for is, again, those things around, what's my meaningful career experience? What impact am I going to make in my role? Can I challenge the status quo? Can I push the boundaries? Am I going to be able to have a voice at the table? Are my opinions going to matter? And, is my work going to be more than the scope of what, is kind of just on a job description? So we look at, factors that are a lot more now in line with current market conditions. And then we kind of basically help organizations decipher what should sit under each of those pillars.
So those 5 pillars are really interesting. From the perspective of where companies are mostly lacking their expertise or being able to amplify their true employer brand, where do you see the biggest gap or the biggest opportunity for companies to really get on top of at least one of those pillars?
Look, I think, definitely all 5 of the pillars hold their weight and their value, in different kind of, in different varying scales. But I think if we're kind of, delving into a particular one, I would definitely say culture. Culture's always been a huge kind of word around, EVP establishment and development, and what does it mean? And it's such a big word, and there's so much that's kind of, falls under culture. So when we think about the shifts in the way that people now think about culture, it extends beyond the traditional. So what's it like to work here? And what are the people like? And, that's what you're kind of very used to hearing. Whereas what we probably are seeing or looking at more are, factors such as a dynamic work environment. Respect is a huge one. So, what respect can I have, in my workplace that I get from my leaders, from my peers? What kind of, what's diversity and inclusion like in an organization? So this, we kind of bucket all of this into culture. We look at things like gender equality. We look at, things like team-based working, working outside of departments and, different cross-functional working. That's a huge one as well, where people now want that autonomy in the cultures that they work in.
Do they want the autonomy, or do they want to hear about the autonomy that the business has?
Look, I think a lot of it is, it's very hard to show sometimes, or to describe a culture where you're not using the kind of same traditional buzzwords of, we're a great place to work and we're really friendly.
Well, they've all got one. It's a bit like a belly button. Everyone's got one. Every company has a culture. Do you feel like they're just not communicating culture in line with the market expectation?
I think culture is becoming a huge, factor for current talent at the moment. So, they want
to attract that talent to the business.
exactly, and talent want to know what's it like, and how are your current employees currently experiencing that culture? What are they getting out of it? How do you actually demonstrate a good cultural place to work? And I think a lot of it is now not just saying, it's actually showing. So, again, a lot of talent want to see. And that's where your kind of messaging and your content and your storytelling comes in really valuable, because, you want to show people genuinely how are they going to feel part of an organization. What's that sense of belonging is a huge factor for candidates at the moment. So they actually want to know how they are going to belong to an organization, and not just be a number or a kind of a seat occupying in an office. So we're seeing a lot more of those kind of things around the importance of showing and not just telling.
Show don't tell, I like that one. So what's the balance between being aspirational and realistic? Because at the end of the day, you don't want your employer brand to attract everyone, right?
Look, I think, yeah, you're right. I mean, I think, there's definitely organizations should still be aspirational. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. And I think organizations do still need to be aspirational, because it's where you want to go. Here's our goals. Here's who we want to be. And here's where we're, what we're aiming for. I think there's a fine line and there's a balance. What you don't want to be is, you don't want to be overly airy fairy where, candidates kind of, go in and then they don't actually get that employee experience. They don't, what they were told and what they're feeling and what they're actually experiencing is very different. And again, that's what leads to those kind of, those poor retention rates where people will leave within the first 3 months, because what they were promised, it's not being delivered. So I think, when you're talking about your aspirations as an organization, I think, be honest, be genuine, be clear. We aspire to be an organization that has a 50%, gender equity, gender balance, rate in our workforce, or, I think there's still a place for having aspirational messaging. But I think what candidates also want that to be balanced out with is the honest truth, and genuine, authentic, what's your place at the moment? What does it look like? What does it feel like? How do you show candidates what they can experience if they join your organization? So whether that's culturally, whether that is through an actual, their actual work and the impact that they're going to have in their work. I still think that there's a good balance. I think good EVPs have that balance.
You just touched on a metric around an aspirational metric around diversity, equality, and inclusion. And that's where I was thinking. That's what I was thinking when you were talking about culture as well. It was going to be my next question. I'm glad we're going to be talking about this. So, how can employer brand really impact the metric on any diversity, equality, and inclusion initiatives that they have?
Look, I think, it definitely has become, a kind of a big employer factor at the moment for people. Everyone's talking about diversity, equity, inclusion. What does it mean? And how can an EVP really help, put a lens on how an organization delivers these things? People are looking for a lot more. If we take just one component of it, diversity, diversity has always been a big thing for a lot of organizations as far back as, I can remember. And, it's one of those things that, again, it's that kind of show me, don't tell me. So I think when we're thinking about how do you effectively communicate DE&I initiatives in an organization, or when you're talking to talent, be honest. And I think it comes back down to that, authentic, honest communication. What is your current stance on diversity? What's the breakdown at the moment in an organization? And that extends again to gender as well. So what's your current workforce made of? People want to know those things. Is it 40-50? Is it 60-40? And that's where you can say, here's the current state, but also, like I said, be aspirational. What are you aiming for? What are you looking for? I think, kind of moving away from those, we want to be a diverse organization is a message that we've always heard. But then how are you actually doing that? And what goals or what strategies have you got in place that make you a diverse workforce? We're then looking at things like inclusion. This is becoming a huge one as well. And also equity. We're seeing a lot more, we look at factors such as, where I guess organizations can really help create that point of differentiation is where they extend a little bit beyond your kind of diversity targets. What's your stance on things like neurodiversity? We're finding a lot more of this coming into play. And I think organizations who are much further down their kind of EVP journey and who have got themselves, a lot more kind of established and a lot more mature in their EVP, they're the ones that are kind of looking at things like neurodiversity and how they help people who might have, let's say, neurodiverse, conditions. That how can they help bring them into the workforce, and what things have they got in place to help people? So I think we're seeing that it extends a lot more than just gender. There's a lot more to it than that.
I feel like we could have a whole episode on diversity, equality, and inclusions and the initiatives that Employer Brand or the impact that Employer Brand is having on it. But it's been an absolute pleasure in you joining me on the Talent Blazer episode. Thanks for your time, Ruby.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been great to just share some of those thoughts. But like you say, talk about this all day.